Action.
Okay, on the respiratory plaque, we want to see the external nares, and they're labeled 1, but they're not really labeled here, but that would be your nose hole. Okay, so that's the actual hole. The vestibule is where you first enter, really anything. When you first enter the mouth, there's a vestibule. It's just the region where you very first enter, so that would be this first part of the nose. The nasal cavity is much bigger. It goes much farther back. And then we have a few spaces up here that are called sinuses. So they're open spaces in the bone, and they're lined with mucus cells. And so they have holes that allow the mucus to drain out into the nasal cavity. So if you have a sinus infection, you feel it in your forehead or behind your eyes or nose or in your face. And this one is called the frontal sinus because it's named for the bone it's in. This is in the frontal bone. That's your frontal bone right above your nose and where your eyes are, kind of your forehead. This one is the sphenoid, because this bone right in the center of your skull, here's the pituitary, sits into that sella turcica, the Turk's saddle. So this is the sphenoid. So that open space there would be the sphenoid sinus. There are 2 other sinuses, but they're not showing them. One of them is the ethmoid, and then one of them is the maxillary. Okay, now in the back of the throat is this tube, and that's the pharynx, which is a fancy word for throat. And the top part is broken into 3 different regions. This top part is called the nasopharynx because it's behind the nose, and it goes from the very top down to the level of the soft palate. So all of this would be nasopharynx. And then the area from the soft palate down to the hyoid bone is the oropharynx because it's behind the oral cavity. And then the part below that is behind the voice box is the laryngopharynx. This is where the body has to decide, is it air, so we send it down the larynx, or is it food and water, and we send it down the trachea. On the roof of the mouth, so this is the oral cavity, here's your teeth, and so this is your mouth. On the roof of the mouth, we have bone. It's actually formed, remember, by the maxilla and the, what's the other one? Palatine bone, so that's these. This is called the hard palate because it's hard, it's bone. From this point back, there's no bone left, so this is soft tissue. So this is called the soft palate, and at the very tip of the soft palate, that's the uvula, that's the hangy down thing in the back of your throat. If you go, you can see it kind of waving around. Let's see what else we have to find. The larynx, that's the voice box. Remember, it's made up of 9 plates of cartilage, so that whole region would be this. It's made up of the epiglottis, this cartilage flap on the top, the thyroid cartilage, which is the Adam's apple, that's going to be the first one. The cricoid cartilage is the second one, right below it. But the one that's known as the Adam's apple is the thyroid cartilage. When you go into the throat, you've got 2 sets of folds in the voice box here, and the top set of folds are called ventricular folds. Is that what they call them? No, the vocal folds are on the bottom, are on the bottom. The ventricular folds are actually on the top. They're called the false vocal cord, and they're there for protection. So if anything gets in, hopefully these guys will stop it. The bottom ones are called the true vocal cords or vocal folds. And these are crazy sensitive, ridiculously sensitive. All right, back up to this one. So here's that larynx. So this is the thyroid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage. All of the rest of these are just called cartilage C rings or tracheal C rings. They're made out of hyaline cartilage, and the functions of these guys are to keep the trachea open. Now they're C-shaped because you've got the esophagus right behind it. So here you can see the cartilage tracheal rings, and right behind it is the esophagus. So food goes down here, and your esophagus is only about as big around as your thumb. So I don't know about you, but when I take a bite of food, it's bigger than the size of as big around as my thumb, right? And so the esophagus has to be able to expand out into the trachea, and that's why the back is open. So those cartilage rings are C-shaped. So this is open and the esophagus is here. So when you take that big bite of bacon double cheeseburger and it stretches out, it has some space to move into the trachea. Okay? So this is the trachea from here down to there. That's the trachea. As soon as it splits, it's going to be called something else. And the first time it splits, this is called the left and right primary bronchi. Okay? The second time it splits, it's called the secondary or lobar bronchi because one of these goes into each lobe of the lung. And then the third time it splits, it's called tertiary bronchi. So this would be primary, this would be secondary, and then all these little squirts would be tertiary. And then it just keeps going, boom, 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 until eventually you get to the terminal bronchiole, and all of this is just tubes. So the walls are still so thick that you can't get the air out yet. So all of this is called the conducting system because it's just going to conduct air. It's not going to actually get through yet. All right. When we get small enough, so eventually we get tiny, tiny, tiny into these little bitty air pockets, and these are called the alveoli. Each one of these little circles that I think looks like grapes. Again, all about food. Those are the alveoli. Okay, but they're also called air pockets. Now, if you have a whole bunch of them together, they're called alveolar sacs. And there's an alveolar duct that goes into a group, a section of them. Let's see what else we have to find on here. Left lung, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arterioles. Okay, coming off of the heart would be the pulmonary trunk, that'd be here, and it's eventually going to split and go into the lungs, and those are called pulmonary arteries because they're going away from the heart, but they're carrying deoxygenated blood. So they go into the lungs, and that would be these, or the purple ones, right? Pulmonary arteries. Because remember, they're carrying the other type of blood. They pick up the oxygen, and when they carry it back to the heart, now it's oxygenated blood. So this is a pulmonary vein or venule. Okay, so then it comes back. These are pulmonary veins. This would be from the left lung, and then there's a set from the right lung as well. Okay, that's the thoracic cavity. Then underneath that is the diaphragm, this thin region of muscle. It's really not very thick at all, but it's very, very broad. It attaches to the bottom of all the ribs all the way around and covers that entire space between the thoracic region and the abdominal region. It's like the top of a drum. And so this muscle is the separator. And we have to have holes in this so that stuff can get in and out. Especially like you take a big bite of bacon double cheeseburger, we don't want it staying up here. It's got to go down to all the organs in the abdomen. So it's got to go through some of these different holes. There are 3 specific holes or spaces. And this one is probably the esophageal hiatus, because that's the esophagus, and that goes through the diaphragm and then into the stomach. This is the foramen for the Vena Cava, or the inferior vena caval opening, because this is the vein that's coming from the lower extremities up to the heart. And the aorta, actually there's an aortic opening. It really doesn't go through the diaphragm, it goes kind of right behind it. But that's what they're trying to show here, because that's definitely a blood vessel. And that's the aorta. I think that's all we need to know on that.
Sweet.
Any questions?